for you, but thank you for your commentary.
I'm
What?
I can already tell this is going to be a fun class.
I can feel your hot air from all the way over here, so you're kidding.
And early, you mean on time for once? Yeah.
The middle row can hear if you're.
All right. What?
That's what it sounds like.
17. We gonna be in 17.
Are we going to the sound of music now?
What? You might need to turn me down if I'm gonna go operatic on this.
This feels like a stand-up.
What? A stand-up?
Hey, if you can teach class C the whole time.
Right, yeah. Wouldn't that be just your dream come true? What? Oh, but tight. All right.
Genesis 17 to the tune of what's it called? Sound music.
Is our life?
16.
Oh. Oh, we were in 16. Now we're in 17. Yeah. Okay. Okay. What is it? It's not Simon and Garfunkel, but what are the guys that forget it. Never mind.
I want you to rap. Oh, the guys.
What? Yeah, the guys that wrote that play. Pinafore. No. Oh my word. What? Okay, let's start class. We're getting. This does not bode well that we got off track before we started. All right. We are going to be in Genesis. Either it is the allergy medication kicking in or the material that we're studying tonight, but I'm excited about what we are going to talk about. We had a great class at Early Bird, so I'm excited to see what you guys bring to the table for what we are talking about. The very first question I want to ask you is, what is the most corrupt system in our world today?
The government.
Wow, right off the bat, the government, okay? All right, the government's corrupt. Anyone else?
World powers.
Okay, so government again.
Enemies.
What?
The enemies.
The enemy, okay, yes, yeah. Anyone who's not us is the corrupt powers, okay? What else?
DraftKings.
Okay, so the casinos, the most corrupt system. Clearly, you guys have not been to the hospital recently because insurance is a scam. You can put that on the recording.
TurboTax and H&R Block.
Okay. Oh yeah, taxes. That's the whole thing is just a scam. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about some corrupt systems, because we are going to be in Genesis 17, but we are going to move right along into Genesis 18, which is going to bring us to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And this is going to be, it sounds weird to say, but I've been looking forward to talking about this story. I think it is misrepresented in Christian circles a lot about just one particular thing about Sodom and Gomorrah, but it might come to surprise you that the Bible has a lot to say about Sodom and Gomorrah, and it hardly ever focuses on what we tend to focus on. So keep that in mind as we go through. But first, we are going to be rated R throughout this whole night tonight, because we've got to start right off the bat with circumcision. So we are in Genesis 17. We didn't really talk about an incredible amount just because I had done a sermon about it about a year ago. But just for a recap, first of all, throughout tonight, women are going to take a pretty hard hit in almost every story that we talk about. And the first one we're going to talk about is Hagar. All right. So remember in chapter 14. Abraham goes to Egypt, and what does he get there? A lot of stuff. Okay, yeah, so we're not sure what his wealth situation was before going into Egypt, but we do know coming out that he is wealthy. In fact, the Bible will actually describe him in very literal terms because Abram was a wealthy man. So was Lot. So we can assume that both of them come out of Egypt with quite the load of stuff. All right? What else does he come out of Egypt with? People. All right? So, not that, and don't mishear me here, it is not that Hagar is a bad person. In fact, we will see throughout this story that Hagar is probably one of the more righteous players in this whole scenario. Hagar herself is not a bad person. However, we do have to start to come to terms with the fact that Abram brought Egypt out with him. All right, remember that big theme that we talked about last week. It is easy for God to get his people out of Egypt, but it is very difficult for him to get Egypt out of his people. And we will see that manifest in the story of Hagar. Because remember, what is her nationality? She is Egyptian. All right, so Sarai and Abram have this really great idea. They think they're going to help God out with his little promise scenario. And they're going to say, you know what, Sarai is super old. There's no way she's going to have a kid. As most people would think. And so Sarai offers up Hagar as a way for Abram's line to go through her. Remember, the servants would be considered possessions. And so clearly Hagar was some sort of servant for Sarai in particular. She wasn't just like working in the house or whatever. She was probably Sarai's like handmaiden or something like that. And so she was the possession of Sarai. So if Hagar were to conceive through Abram, it would be like Sarai did. So that's kind of the thinking here. So that happens, or Sarai proposes this. What does Abram say? Oh, sounds good to me. So right from the get-go, I want us to notice the agency of Abram here, which is what? Nothing. Okay? He doesn't really have a say in the matter. However, we do know that God actually tells him to listen to his wife. So there's some back and forth there in rabbinical circles about how much Abram is to blame for this situation. So Hagar does conceive. What was her son's name? Ishmael. All right, yes. And by all accounts, Abram actually loves Ishmael. They seem to have a fairly good relationship. In fact, Abram will defend Ishmael on several different counts. So Abram does feel like Ishmael is his son. We're not sure what happened. We're not sure of the context, but somehow Sarai and Hagar get crossways with one another. I can't imagine what it might have been about, but that was sarcasm. But Hagar then flees. Most likely because Sarai was probably going to put her in danger, literal physical danger. And so Hagar flees, and she is visited by God, and she is one of the very, very, very few people in the Bible and the only woman to name God. Anyone remember what name she gives God? Anyone? El Roi, which means the God who sees, or the inference being the God who sees me. All right? So that is going to become, that is going to play into the narrative that follows, is God is a God who sees the oppressed. Okay? Once again, we see this really, really interesting thing about Abram's character. Because what do we know, right? What is the first story we get about Abram? What does he do? It's right in the genealogy. What does he do? The very first thing we know about him. He marries his niece, who is barren. So we know that this guy has a heart for the downtrodden, a heart for the vulnerable. And yet, what does he do in the Hagar situation? Nothing. So we can kind of see once again that Abram is while being an incredible partner and having immense faith, he is also human. And sometimes under pressure, even our best traits can take a back seat to selfishness and greed. Here we go. So here is God's solution to some of the things that are happening over in Abram town. Here we go. 17, verse 1. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, that I may make a covenant between me and you, and may multiply you greatly. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, Behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham, for I have made you a father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you, and I will establish my covenant between you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant to be God to you, to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised. Every male throughout your generations, whether born in your house or bought with your money, for any foreigner who is not your offspring. Both he who is born in your house and he who is bought with your money shall surely be circumcised, so that my covenant be in your flesh an everlasting account. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. And God said to Abraham, As far as Sarai your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of people shall come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, said to him, Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. God said, No, but Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call him Isaac or Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you, and behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly. He shall father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation, but I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year. Okay. What's weird? All right, so name changes. That's a little bit different. Okay. Has anyone changed names before? Not up to this point, especially not from God. Okay. What else?
It's also, their names got extended. Not sure.
Right. Yes. Yes. So usually we're going from Cephas to Peter, at least a little bit more snippy. Okay. But now it gets a little bit longer. Just chow down on that chicken, don't you? Anyway.
I got it for 6:30. So
Okay.
I'll mention the, again, God telling them that they will be multiplied, his descendants will be multiplied.
Yeah, it seemed like I read that about 600 times. Okay, yeah, so that repeats itself. What else?
I know he's talking to Abraham at this point. In verse 20, as for Ishmael, I heard you, and I will bless you.
Yeah, uh-huh.
So we don't see that anywhere else in this or beforehand, but it seems like he was maybe petitioning on Ishmael's side.
Yes, yeah, and so he says, it's like, that Ishmael might live before you. That, please, just let Ishmael be the covenant guy. That shows a real affection and love and respect for Ishmael. I think that Abraham definitely thought that Ishmael was the dude, the child. Yeah.
He describes Abraham's descendants as strangers.
Uh-huh. Yep, sojourners. Yes, yeah, uh-huh.
Being the ones that will actually call it their home.
Right, yes, yeah. So I will give you to the land, I will give you the land of your sojourning, yep.
It's also kind of weird that, this whole thing happens with Hagar. I mean, she gets basically abused and kicked out.
Uh-huh.
Abram does nothing about it. And the next thing we see is God is like, oh, bless you. And it's like, what the heck? But then God's like, but you
yeah.
have to do something for me, buddy.
Right, yeah, okay. So, yes, all right. So we have this we have a thing about we need to make a covenant. We need to make a sign. All right. And then you kind of touched on what is the weirdest part about this? What? Okay, so have we talked about circumcision at all up until this point in the story?
Nope.
Where does this come from? Okay, I think there was a comedian where the promises got a little bit bigger as they was like, build me a boat, have major surgery. Yeah, Richard, did you have something?
In my translation, verse 17 says, then Abraham prostrated himself and laughed.
Yeah, so he falls down and laughs, all right? So going a little bit further in the story, who do we know also laughs?
Sarah.
Interesting. Okay, so we hardly ever talk about Abraham's laugh. We talk a lot about Sarah's laugh. We're going to look at that a little bit. But we do...
One of the things
Yeah.
also, it says that Sarah, where is it? In verse 16, I will bless her, and she shall become nations.
Yeah, okay, so are you saying that might repeat itself? Do you smell that? Yeah, oh boy, the stench of chiasm is in the air. That's what I say. Yeah, so we have name change, we have promise, and we have moving forward in. I'd like to show you kind of just what a chiasm might look like in your Bibles if you had the paper or the digital version. This is kind of what a chiasm would look like. So we know this is one of the easier ones to find because we can know kind of where it mirrors pretty clearly. We know that the outside of the chiasm is going to be Abraham fell face down, Abram fell face down. You hardly ever get that, just that pronounced of a chiasm, like, okay. And so then we have a name change. You will be called Abram. We have a name change. You will be called Sarah. Then we have everlasting covenant, everlasting covenant. We have foreigner or sojourner or stranger, foreigner. We have foreigner. We have generations to come. We have generations to come, with the middle being in every male among you shall be circumcised. All right, what do we know about the middles of chiasms?
That's the important part.
That's the important part. That's the key. That's the key to deciphering the rest of the passage. So now we have quite the task before us. What's the deal with circumcision? Okay. Yeah. I told you it's going to be rated R for the rest of the time. And now we have to talk about circumcision because that's the key to the chiasm. That's the middle of the chiasm. So how we figure this out actually starts in the name changes, okay? So things to note, in the Hebrew, Abram means exalted father, Abraham means father of many. Sarai means my princess, Sarah means princess. What's happening? Why these name changes?
They're more personal?
A little bit more personal.
To reflect the covenant.
Okay, reflects a starting of the new covenant. If I called you, you are an exalted father, Kenneth. You have 2 sons. What's the difference? How do you feel? How do you feel? If you just heard me say you are an exalted father and you are a father, how do you feel?
Less than.
Okay, yes, yeah. Why am I not exalted? I'm way better than Kenneth. Okay, yeah. So, exalted father to a father. Okay? My princess to a princess. What's happening?
They're being demoted.
They're being humbled for sure.
Oh.
So, what happened in the Hagar story? What was the problem?
Took advantage of their power position.
There was dysfunction in the power dynamic. What we know is that whenever Hagar flees, it's because her and Sarai get crossways. And it almost seems like Hagar was lording it over Sarai that she had a son. So imagine this power dynamic for me, if you will. Abram thinks he's the boss of everybody. Sarah thinks she's the boss of Hagar because she's the slave. Hagar thinks she's better than Sarai because she has a son. And all of these three people live together. God is saying, your power dynamics are messed up. So instead, you are not exalted father anymore. You are father of many. Not bad, but not your position that you thought you were. Instead of my princess being possessive, you are now princess. This, in my view, is a possibility of a correction in the power dynamic, which God is trying to, and that's why these two stories are placed together. I actually think they're a little bit out of timeline with each other, but I think that they're placed side by side to say, chapter 16, there was a problem. Chapter 17, this is God's solution. So as we go forward then, we like, okay, so he's switching the power dynamic. So how does circumcision fix that?
That'd humble me
It-
pretty quickly.
What?
That'd humble me if I had to be a 100-year-old.
Yeah, first of all, you're not going to be moving around very much for sure. That's, in a sense, it goes back to this theme that we've had throughout Genesis, which I know if you were to say, what's the theme of Genesis, you would never pick this word until we've gone through this study. But nakedness. Not to get graphic on you, but how do you know someone's circumcised? When they in the nude. Okay? And in the ancient Near East, we've actually talked a little bit about this before, but clothes make the man. All right? If you are dressed in power, that means you are powerful. If you are dressed as a servant, that means you are a servant. We actually talked about this a little bit when we talked about John 13, about how Jesus took off his rabbi garments and put on servant garments. That's why Peter actually acts so aggressively towards this. It's like, whoa, hey, you're messing up the power dynamic. You're taking off your rabbi and putting on your servant. Okay? When we talk about circumcision, the only way you're getting circumcised is if you take off who you are. Everybody is equal in this covenant, which says something, because who is all circumcised here? The men? What men?
Spiritual.
Everybody in his household.
Everybody. What do we know about everybody in his household?
They're more than 8 days old.
Well, first off, yowza. All right, so that's going to be a line that you want to be last in. What else do we know about them? Where's Hagar from? Egypt. What makes us think that anybody else is from Abram's clan? There's a lot of foreigners in there. And God even says, and if you pick up more, guess what they have to do? And I think this is a huge thing because it shows equality. It says, even the foreigner among you is going to have a sign of the covenant if they're in your house. We are all equal in this. If there is anything more humbling than that, I don't know. Everyone is equal before God in this little scenario. Okay? Historical footnote, while circumcision kind of comes out of nowhere in the Genesis narrative, we haven't talked about it before until this moment. And if you were reading Genesis in a vacuum, you might be thinking, like, how in the world did they come up with that? It's interesting to note that circumcision would not have been, it would have been unique, but it would not have been unheard of in this time. There are actually some pretty good historical evidence that other societies also practiced circumcision. Most interestingly, if historical sources can be believed, circumcision was practiced in Egypt. where they just came from. And in fact, not necessarily the way Abraham and his household is going to practice circumcision, but there are some historical samples to say that Egyptian priests would actually, in order to enter the order of priests, would have to be circumcised. And this is just Garrett's little fun theory, I think. Could this be a preview of the kingdom of priests that God is going to build? Because where did they just come from? Egypt. So what might they associate circumcision with? Priesthood.
So it's also possible that the Egyptian servants and whatnot, they would have been familiar with the practice. That it would not have come as a, hey, you just went off to pray and came back with some weird instructions.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. It's like I don't think Abraham would have been like, what? That much. I think he would have been like, can you repeat that? but I don't think it would have been as shocking as it probably seems. It seems like cultures around the area were doing this, but most of the time it was a religious rite, not necessarily something that you just got whenever you were 8 days old by being in this clan. So, I don't know, kind of fun to think about. Yeah. I mean, not that part.
I'd like to be the 8th day old in this story.
Right, yeah, So, yeah, poor Ishmael. He got the brunt of everything for, anyway. So, that's kind of the deal with circumcision, and that's why a lot of rabbis are going to say that's the center of the chiasm, is because it was to promote equality among everyone in the clan because there was power dynamic problems. And so, circumcision. Let's continue in verse 8, or chapter 18. We are going to get into the sin of Sodom. So let's put on our Bible hats and see what we can get from this story that maybe we have overlooked in the past. And the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. Just a fun little historical tidbit. Why might Abraham be sitting at the doorpost in the heat of the day? He just got a little bit of major surgery going on and he's recovering, okay? So why I point that out is that actually has something to do with the story. I'm not just trying to embarrass Abraham. But so he's sitting down probably because he hurting, all right? Which makes this next verse hit just a little bit different. In verse 2, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, O Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree, while I bring a morsel of bread that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on. Since you have come to your servant, so they said, do as you have said. And Abraham went quickly into the tent and to Sarah and said, quick, 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf tender and good and gave it to a young man who prepared it quickly. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, where is Sarah your wife? And he said, she is in the tent. The Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have this pleasure? The Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At that appointed time I will return to you, and this time next year Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. But he said, no, you did laugh. Okay? So a little bit of, all right. So something that kind of we gloss over as Westerners, I think we've talked about this before, but whenever we're talking about what makes Abraham so special, what do we usually point to? Why did God choose Abraham? Faith, all right? once again, we've talked about this before, so it shouldn't be a complete surprise. But Westerners are going to say faith is what defines Abraham. Easterners are actually going to say radical hospitality. That is what defines Abraham. And I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this story, because it kind of informs a little bit about what Lot does. Okay? So keep that in mind, that the defining characteristic in the Eastern mind for Abraham's family is radical hospitality. And in fact, this is so pronounced in Eastern culture that they still practice it today. If you go to Turkey or Israel or even any Muslim countries, they will practice radical generosity. Why might that be? We all come from this dude. Supposedly, all Muslims, Jews, and Christians should all be practicing radical hospitality based on Abraham's example. Because, once again, what kind of flies over our head is that, so first of all, what does Abraham promise the three men? What does he say he's going to bring them? A little bit of water and maybe a crumb or two in the cupboard. So then he runs to Sarah and says, I need 3 seahs of flour, I need the finest calf we've got, and I need enough water to drown in a village. And here's the expectation, would be like a little meal, you know, it's like a little afternoon light snack, maybe a, what are those things that I have at small groups? Charcuterie board. Yeah, maybe bringing out the charcuterie board. Yeah, get to my level. And then what is interesting is that Abraham goes and asks for 3 seahs. So 1 seah is about 2 gallons of flour. He asked for 3. 3 seahs would be about 6 gallons of flour, which would weigh about 35 to 40 pounds. The thing here being, there's 3 guys that come to his door, and he wants enough bread to feed about 125 people. He wants a feast. And first of all, remember, why is he sitting down? He's hurting, and what does he do? He runs, okay? That is radical hospitality.
Wasn't it also true that the head of household, the men, they didn't do a lot of running?
No, it was very undignified. You're absolutely right. We're actually going to see Lot do, like, still show hospitality, but not radical. Like, he's not going to run. He's not going to dirty himself with running. Abraham is going to run. Hurt and run and go way, way overboard.
Can I just say?
Well, hold on. What?
Why is running such like a bad thing back in this? Because it just
got
does.
Well, and I wouldn't say it's super, I wouldn't say it's super good to this day and age either. For instance, if I saw, let's take my dad. If he was out there and he ran that way, what is my thinking? He's being chased by a bear, because that's the only time my dad runs, okay? Yeah, I mean, that's the only time I run, is if I'm afraid of something or something is wrong, okay? So I wouldn't, that's the kind of thing we're talking about, is that he's running.
I also put it akin to how you see people who are like celebrities who think they're pretty good, you know, like they never rush. Like they walk into the room so the room could absorb their presence.
Yes,
And
yeah.
Like I never imagined a CEO running down
Right,
the
yeah.
room.
You are supposed to wait on me.
Right.
Yeah. The meeting doesn't start till I walk in. Yeah, right.
These 2 characters are very athletic for being 90+ years old.
Yeah.
They've got some heft to them. I'll tell you that much. Let's not poke that anymore.
Garrett, at what point do you think you recognize them as angels? Because if you recognize them as angels, you can see him doing.
Yeah. I honestly don't know if he knows until they say the thing about Sarah.
Well,
Right.
Yeah.
Because in the like the word he uses when he says my Lord, it's not like denoting God.
Yeah, it's not like Adonai, it's like, sir. Like, come, sir, let's talk about this. Yeah, and so I agree. I think he goes overboard and then realizes, whew, that was a close one. Yeah, so good. Interestingly enough, we have two different reactions, both laughter. Whenever they are told the promise about having a child in their old age. With Abraham's laughter in the Hebrew, it is wonder and joy. It is like, I got the winning ticket and I got the lottery. Like, that's the kind of laughter and joy that we see. That is why Sarah's laugh is described as what? Like, to herself. She's like, there's no way that's happening. It denotes a cynical viewpoint of it all. Like, there's no way that's going to happen. Ha, ha, ha. Good joke, God.
But doesn't it seem like it's almost opposite of that, though? Because Abraham's the one that said, what about Ishmael? Like, you said,
Right, yes,
what
yeah.
about Ishmael? And hers could almost be the opposite in the sense of saying, like, really? Like, to someone who's born up, like, is that even possible?
Right, yes, and it would seem like by the reactions, the only thing that makes us know that this is kind of it is God's reaction to their laughter. Like, God doesn't smack Abraham down for laughing like he does Sarah. He gives her a pretty good verbal beatdown. No.
She lies about it.
Yeah, and so it's like, yeah, it's probably not a laugh of faith if she's like, no, I didn't do that. Yeah. No, that was Hagar. So we have two different reactions to this about the impossibility of this. What's fun is that God kind of needles them a bit, but also reclaims their mistake, especially Sarah's mistake, by naming him Isaac or Yitzhak, which means he laughs or laughter. What I love about that is every time Abraham or Sarah called their son's name, they were forced to remember the moment they doubted God. It wasn't a shameful name. It turned their cynical secret into a public testimony. It's as if God said, you laughed because you thought it was impossible. Now you'll laugh every day because I made it possible. And that's just a good reflection and a good thought to have about how God can reclaim our mistakes. Like, even though we mess up, and even though there are bumps in the road, that doesn't mean God can't use your mistakes for the betterment of his story. He can reclaim them. That's what we see here in this story is Isaac is now, he laughs. Cool, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. All right. This is an absolute bonkers passage. We are going to go ahead and get into, we are going to be in verse, actually we're just going to pick up where we left off, verse 16. Of chapter 18, verse 16. Then the men set out from there, and they looked down towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to set them on their way. The Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. Then the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. And if not, I will know. What gets God's attention? The outcry. Okay, anyone know another famous story that God's attention is buzzed because of an outcry?
Abel's blood.
Right before the flood.
And Abel's blood.
Abel's blood. And fast forward.
The Israelites in Egypt.
Exodus. The Exodus story starts off with, and he heard the cry of his people. So, when we talk about I know it is a little bit of a mystery, Terry. I like it. So, when we hear outcry, what should we be thinking is happening?
Suffering.
Suffering,
Slavery.
Of the innocent.
oppression of the innocent. I'm going to give away a little bit of the ball here. Should we be thinking sexual immorality?
Not necessary.
Not necessary. Not the first thing to spring to mind. Okay? So, what I want us to get right off the bat here, is Sodom and Gomorrah are guilty of what at the very beginning? Oppression. All right? That's all we know so far. Oppression. So the men turned from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. Then Abraham drew near and said, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just?" And the Lord said, "If I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Abram answered and said, "Behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord, I who am dust and ashes. Suppose 5 of the 50 are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And he said, "I will not destroy it if I find 45 there." Again he spoke and said, "Suppose 40 are there." He answered, "For the sake of 40 I will not do it." Then he said, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 are found there. He answered, "I will not do it if I find 30. He said, "Behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there." He answered, "For the sake of 20 I will not destroy it." And then he said, let not the Lord be angry. I will speak again, but this once. Suppose 10 are found there. He answered, "For the sake of 10 I will not destroy it." And the Lord went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place.
We need him for an auction.
Okay, yes, yeah, 45. Okay, so what's weird about this story?
Why didn't he go all the way down to like 3? Lot and his daughter.
Why stop at 10? Yeah, okay, so we know, what is Abraham's primary motivation, most likely? Who does he know is in Sodom? Lot. Okay, so probably primary motivation here is, I gotta save Lot again. So that's probably why he's bargaining. And Declan brings up a good point. Why 10? Why not stop at, okay, what if we just got Lot out? What about that? All right? So, but keep in mind, he's not saying, if I find 50 people there, we'll take the 50 out and destroy the rest of the city. What is he asking for?
Spare the city.
Spare the city on the sake of 50. Okay, so the whole city gets spared if you can find 50, 45, 30, 20, 10. All right, what else is weird?
So do they know how many people lived in Sodom and Gomorrah by that time? I mean, it had to be thousands and thousands of people.
So what is so interesting about this is, remember, when we talk about conversations between people, if it's interrupted by a weird thing like he said, what happened? There's a pause. So
God said,
this is what I imagined happened. Abraham goes to God and be like, what if there's 50? Okay, 45. Because Abraham, I believe, goes and peeks a little bit at Sodom and is like, okay, probably not 50. What about 30? What about 20? Okay, 10. What if I find 10? Okay? So there's a pause there. This is a bargaining that's passing. Yeah.
Sorry, another weird thing. So their main issue is oppression.
Yeah.
But all of them are evil. So who are they oppressing? Are they just oppressing themselves? Or?
So we're going to see that. We're going to see who they are oppressing in particular. Yeah.
Something that I kind of caught on to is, how did Abraham find out if the Lord was asking the question just before, should I hide this from Abraham?
Yeah, okay, so first of all, who in tarnation is God talking to?
Who snitched?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, well, I mean, to be honest, like, okay, so who is God talking to in that moment? I mean, the passage kind of maybe indicates that it's the three men, the three angels, but also maybe not, because the three men left. So it's a very, very weird thing. And what does it imply? Should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? And what's weirder is he doesn't seem to.
It does seem like it's almost like saying, you know, like, should I not tell the kids something, and because I know that it's going to affect them,
Right, yeah.
or should I just go ahead and let them know beforehand?
Right, yes, yeah. It's like if you have to tell the kids we got to put the dog down.
Right.
Like, should we tell like Sodom and Gomorrah went to a farm?
It also implies that God had a plan in place, and he's like, this is what I'm getting ready to do.
Yes, yeah, uh-huh.
Do it.
Right. And so it's like it's a very weird thing. So we see that this is the evolution of the partnership. God values Abraham so much as a covenantal partner that he decides not to hide something that he's going to do to Abraham because he knows that he wants a partner, not a puppet. And so that's kind of what this passage is, I believe, trying to get at. He is seeking a partner to help steward justice, not a subject to simply obey orders. Here's an interesting thought for you. So, first of all, what is Abraham's reaction whenever he learns what God wants to do? He intercedes, okay? He starts bargaining. This is actually a cure. Remember how we talked about Abraham as a cure for a lot of stories? This is actually a cure for a story we have heard before. I'll give you a hint. When else have we seen a lot of death and destruction come on the scene? The flood, okay? God tells Noah about the flood. What is Noah's reaction?
All right, guess I'm building the boat.
Okay, yep, well, I got mine. Okay, yep, we'll all board the boat, and good luck, everybody else. And the reason why we usually gloss over this cure is because we don't usually fault Noah. We usually don't fault him for not trying to save everyone else. We usually fault God more than anything. But we don't often fault Noah for trying to intercede on people's behalf.
And I think, from what I can remember back from my, felt board days,
Yeah.
is that a lot of times the teachers would describe it as though other people, like Noah's out there building the boat, they're asking him why he's doing it. He's like, God's going to make it rain. And they're like, what's that? And they laugh at him, they walk away. And it's almost like, oh, they almost had a chance, and they chose to
Yeah,
God.
yeah, and that's a nice, felt board version of the story. It doesn't like we know that they were ridiculing him, but we don't know what he said to that. We don't know him be like, well, God told me, and there. I mean, right? Yeah, yeah. You'll be like, you're laughing now. Yeah, yeah. I think that's a little.
He didn't seem to be evangelized.
Yeah. He didn't seem to be like, oh, you all should get on the boat. Nope, no, that's the space for the rhinos. Yeah. So here we also have this really fun word, and it's my favorite word that I've learned from the Hebrew. It is chutzpah. Chutzpah. And it is going to define Abraham's family from here on out, which is chutzpah. And chutzpah is like audacity. It is, because whenever we look at this story, sometimes we can say it's like, wow, Abraham bargaining with God? Like, that's a little irreverent. That's a little disrespectful. Here we actually see that God loves it when his kids push back a little bit, especially when it's on the side of justice. Fast forward, when do we see this again? Moses. And in fact, he says this exact same thing. We see that God admires those with a fire in their belly, even whenever it's used incorrectly. The the character with probably the most chutzpah in all of the Bible is going to be, anyone want to take a guess? For sure, Jacob. If you thought bargaining with God was disrespectful, how about wrestling him to the ground? And winning. Yeah. So Jacob is insane with chutzpah. And it becomes a defining characteristic. A lot of rabbis are going to say the reason that God looked down on Esau was because Esau did not have enough drive to fight for what he wanted. Jacob, at the very least, not condoning deceit, but at the very least had the fire in his belly to get what he wanted. It's just, if you think about that story, God could have said, no, you got that through bad means, I'm still going to go with Esau. But instead he saw something in Jacob that says, I can work with that. And it's this kind of audacity. It's the audacity of intimacy. Abraham holds God to God's own standards of mishpat, or justice, and tzedekah, which righteousness. He says, surely a God as righteous as you, as filled with justice as you, would not do this.
And also, God told Abraham that nations would be blessed through him. And so, at this point, this is Sodom and Gomorrah's last chance to survive.
Yeah, so maybe he's taking that blessing a little bit seriously and kind of preempting a little bit. Yeah, it's like, hey, we need to talk about this. What is interesting here is that this will actually start a tradition right here. Abraham stops at 10, which is a minyah, and that's actually carried on in Jewish tradition. To have a temple service or a tabernacle service, how many guys do you think you need? 10. And what's interesting is, like, a lot of times people will quote that New Testament verse about how if one or two are gathered in my name, there I am also. That is not about the assembly. Okay, that's nice. God's presence is with us always, but that's not about the assembly. In Jewish tradition, an assembly is 10 or more. And so what Abraham is trying to get across is, even if there is the smallest church there can be, the smallest seed of goodness in Sodom, you should spare them. Yeah.
Don't you think Abraham had to be thinking, Lot's household would have to be at least 10?
Sure, yeah.
My own ought to have at least 10 to save the two cities.
Yeah.
And what's that say about Lot, that they couldn't get 10?
Right, yes, yeah. What does that say about Lot's household? And yes, what does that say about Lot himself?
His daughters weren't good.
Well, they kind of get a raw deal, I'll tell you that much. I think there's some PTSD going on that would mess up a normal person. Here's that kind of Abraham versus Noah thing we were talking about. Noah built a boat to save himself and his family. He was personally clean, but did not intercede for his neighbors. Whereas Abraham's audacity, he stood his ground. True righteousness and just personal purity. It's a burden for the restoration of the world. I don't know why that picture. Yeah, it's.
Those jet skis.
Yeah,
That's what an elephant is.
Yes. Sometimes Gemini gets it right. Sometimes it gets it wrong. I don't know what to tell you. Okay. All right. What was the sin of Sodom? Oppression. Okay. We're going to go one step further and say inhospitality. What is funny is that I know Adam just said it under his breath, Sarah, but whenever I asked that question in 4:30, what do you think their guess was? What is the sin of Sodom?
Sexual love.
Don't call them Sodomites for nothing, do we? Okay? Yeah, it's homosexuality. That's the big sin of Sodom. And first, no. It's not the big sin of Sodom. It is a sin of Sodom, yes. However, and I feel pretty firmly about this, mostly because I have the Bible on my side. When the Bible talks about Sodom and Gomorrah quite a few times, how many times do you think it mentions homosexuality in the description of Sodom and Gomorrah? If you say goose egg, you would be correct. The most we get is from Ezekiel 16:49 that says, "Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and the needy. They were haughty and did an abomination before me." Now I know what you're thinking. Abomination! Look, abomination! That's homosexuality. Keep in mind, I pulled this out of nowhere, so you should... the fact that you might not know this is perfectly understandable. But Ezekiel 16 is actually talking about abominations in terms of Israel. And nowhere is homosexuality mentioned. The abomination is not taking care of the poor and needy. Okay? God's biggest pet peeve, right up there with idolatry, is oppression. Amos, Isaiah, Ezekiel, lots of prophets are going to say, my biggest pet peeve is whenever you don't treat people the way they're supposed to be treated, is oppression. Now, here's what I want us to shift in our lens about Sodom and Gomorrah. A lot of times in the Western view, we're going to say it was all about the individual sexual immorality. Here, I want to talk about systemic injustice and neglect. Instead of talking about these were personal decisions that we all need to avoid, it's about sacred hospitality and health. Instead of thinking I want to avoid their specific sins, it's about avoiding arrogance. With that backdrop. Oh, man. Okay, so to summarize. 2 angels come to Sodom. Where do we see Lot?
At the gate.
At the gate. Anyone know historically what that means about Lot?
He's a hooker.
What? No, but I see where your head is, and I appreciate your confidence. No. What was it? What was it? An elder or a leader. Okay. So if you are at the city gates, that means you are a leader. All right. He sees the 2 men come, and what is his reaction? Do you think?
Come in.
Yeah. Like we talked about, does he do what Abraham does?
He doesn't run.
He's not over the top about it, but he does. That radical generosity is a part of his DNA. So he is hospitable to these guys. So he brings them in. What is interesting is that it says in verse 4, "But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house." Everyone was there. Declan made a good point. Everybody is there. The whole town is oppressing. So who are they oppressing?
Seems like everyone.
So yeah, they probably have a common enemy right now, and so they're not oppressing each other, just oppressing them. But in this instance, who are they oppressing?
The messenger.
Yes, the messengers who would be to them foreigners and outsiders. You are vulnerable. We know we can do whatever we want to you because you are an outsider. You don't have any protection, any family in here. So we are going to oppress you. They are being the very definition of inhospitable. And keep in mind, in the ancient Near Eastern culture, when we talk about being inhospitable, there is not a hotel every few miles that you can book. There is not an Airbnb that you can go ahead and lodge in. If someone says, "I don't want you here," they are basically saying, "I don't care if you die. Get out of here." So hospitality was a huge, huge element to this culture. Just like I said. Keep in mind, everybody was there. It was a cultural commitment to exploiting the vulnerable. Violence was about humiliation and control. You are not a guest. You are beneath us. What is Lot's response to the men? Don't do this, but here are my daughters. All right, like I said, women are going to take a pretty harsh turn here in these stories. A lot of people are going to point to this story as a good proof text of sexism in the Bible. And they are 100% right. This is absolutely accurate. Lot does not make a good decision here. This is a horrible decision. But to understand why he makes it, you need to know that even the good impulse to be hospitable in Sodom was corrupted. Even that good impulse was corrupted to where, to protect his guests, he was willing to sacrifice his family. That was not the right call. And you can see Lot's descent here. Before, he had just his eyes on Sodom. Then he pitches his tent near Sodom. And next we see him sitting in the gate at Sodom, which means he was a leader. And then we see the full depth of his corruption by offering his daughters to appease a mob. That's the fall of Lot. What's really interesting about his story, and I had never actually caught this until I started studying, verse 15 says, as morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. But verse 16 says, but he lingered. So the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand. The Lord being merciful to him, they brought him out and set him outside the city. Lot was so corrupted and so consumed with where he was that even in the face of certain destruction, he couldn't leave. The angels had to drag him out.
I've also heard it, how him compared to his uncle Abraham there, and how Abraham bargained for obviously their protection and for them not to be wiped away, and then Lot just kind of, he did beg them not to do this thing.
Yeah.
But then offered his daughters.
Yes. Yeah.
And
appeasement.
And like
yeah.
you were talking about the radical generosity, and how Lot didn't do that. How there was that difference of I guess you'd say, the corruption.
Yeah.
And how he lingered, and how Abraham was willing to move, and he was willing to go, and
Yeah.
he said go. So there are all the differences of mindset.
Yeah, and it makes that connection between Lot's willingness to stay and Abraham's willingness to go. I think you're exactly right. So he hesitated. Lot spent so much time sitting in the gate that he lost the ability to recognize danger. He was paralyzed by his investment in the system. Sin is more than doing bad things. It is a system of belonging. Lot's heart was still at home in Sodom. All right? So he's so bought into this system of oppression. And guess what? Who is this system working for? Clearly Lot. He's in the big house. He's the big dog. Clearly he figured out how to work the system. It's not about him being oppressed, we learn in this story. It's about him being a part of the system. Who looks back? What happens to her?
Salt.
Once again, women kind of getting kicked in the face on these stories. I want us to know that in the Hebrew, it's not necessarily that she was like, oh, did I leave the stove on? It's about a longing gaze. It was more than just like it was, she looked back and almost certainly stopped and was considering going back. And this pillar of salt, it's not just that she turned into a pillar of salt and Lot put her in like a salt shaker and be like, this will be good for steak. A pillar of salt meant she was part of the landscape. Basically, God said, if you want to stay, here you go. But guess what happens to Sodom and Gomorrah? Scorched earth. Anyone remember like the strategy of scorched earth? What do you put on the crops to scorch the earth? Cool, right? Jesus has some harsh words for Sodom, and it was directed at the religious elite. So certainly not us, right? Jesus said it will be more bearable for Sodom than for religious cities like Capernaum. Sodom was honest about its wickedness. Capernaum had the miracles and the text, but lacked compassion. Religious arrogance is more dangerous than pagan ignorance. That is a lesson. That is the lesson from Sodom and Gomorrah. Religious arrogance and oppression is even worse than pagan ignorance like Sodom and Gomorrah. It will be worse for you if you are the oppressor rather than Sodom and Gomorrah. I think that's it. Any comments or concerns or questions? Yeah.
So, if Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt for her longing to stay back in Sodom,
Yeah.
then why did the angels drag Lot out?
It seems like that happens after. So Lot, he's dragged out, and then they talk a little bit, and then they move forward. So it seems like after the conversation they have, Lot is more willing to move, but wife is not. Will you grant me 2 minutes? There's another story here that's super duper gross, and it's about Lot and his daughters. They go into a cave, and they have incest in order to repopulate the clan. A lot of rabbis are going to say, which I find this super interesting, is that showed a lack of trust in the story. Because when's the last time a huge, major destruction of humanity by God, what actually happened?
The flood and then rebirth.
Yeah, and the whole world was destroyed. They didn't trust that God was true to his promise, that he wasn't going to destroy the world again. So whenever they see destruction, they go into a cave and think what?
This is it.
We're the last three left. Which might inform their extreme actions. Does it excuse them? No.
Because it almost seems like he could just go up to Uncle's house.
Right? Yeah, it's like we know that Abraham's household is pretty big. Like we can't, and that's why that's a lot of questions answered for me. Is that's like, oh, they thought this was over. Like everything was over. We're the last people in this cave, and we got to make it work. So that might explain some of the extreme detail in that story. Any other comments, concerns, or questions about Sodom and Gomorrah? What was the sin of Sodom? Oppression. All right. Does that mean that their actions with the angels were okay?
No.
No, absolutely not.
That's part of the oppression.
That's part of the oppression, yes. But I do want to make the point that if the angels had been women, it would have been the same story. The same thing would have happened.
Probably
Okay?
worse.
And probably worse. You're probably right about that. Probably worse. It wasn't about homosexuality in this story. Don't make this story's message about that. There are plenty of other passages to make that point for you. Don't make this one it. All right. Thanks for your attention. We will see you next week.
Thank you.
Woo! Oh, thank you.
Thanks for the little boat. That was good.